Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, which will cover using metrics to guide stronger outside counsel management practices. I'm Sadie Elwood, and I am a campaign management marketer here at Thomson Reuters. Before we begin, I just need to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit them through the orange Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, they will be answered later. Please know we do capture all questions. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background. Webinars are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. This webcast is being streamed through your computer, so as I'm sure you've noticed, there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or headset are turned on and the volume is up so you can hear the presenters. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides do end up behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the orange help widget at the bottom of your screen. You'll also notice that we've provided additional resources for you to download in the resources list at the bottom of your screen: articles, reports, the presentation deck. And lastly, there is a clipboard icon for the survey section where you can enter any feedback on this presentation or provide topic suggestions for future webcasts you'd like to see. The on-demand version of this webcast can be accessed at any time using the same audience link that we sent to you earlier. Note that we will also be sending out a copy of the recording after the presentation has concluded. And the presentation deck is in the additional resources widget, as I mentioned before. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator today, Kelsey Nickel. Take it away, Kelsey.
Great, thanks so much, Sadie, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we are going to discuss using metrics to guide stronger outside counsel management practices, particularly related to our recent State of the Corporate Legal Department survey, in which we really want to dig in further around how we can best manage working with our outside counsel. And I am particularly excited today to be joined by two awesome leaders within the legal operations space, Ryan Albrechts and Megan Fish. And I am going to let them introduce themselves here in just a minute. But just a quick word about who I am. So I am Kelsey Nickel. I am a position manager here within our corporates legal team at Thomson Reuters. And I work on all of the great products that we provide to our corporate legal department clients. So particularly Legal Tracker, HiQ, Practical Law, and Westlaw. I used to be on our Legal Tracker sales team a few years ago when I first started at Thomson Reuters. And prior to joining Thomson Reuters, I actually was the tracker coordinator and part of the legal operations team at Target Corporation for about 8 years. And I helped them, again, with all things tracker, but also worked on firm scorecards and diversity metrics. So if that's ever something you're interested in talking about and kind of discussing ideas with, I'd be more than happy to dive into some of those ideas with you. But without further ado, I do absolutely want to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. I'm hoping, Ryan, I'll let you start us off and give just a brief bio of who you are and what you've been working on.
Hi, Kelsey. Thanks for having me. So I'm Ryan Albrechts, Senior Legal Operations Manager at Stryker. Stryker is a leading medical technology company driven to make healthcare better. I've been with Stryker for close to 2 years, and I've been in the legal operations and compliance space for about 7 or 8 years. I do have a law degree that I received from Marquette University Law School. And at Stryker, my primary areas of responsibility are firm and vendor management, financial management, business intelligence, technology, and service delivery models. And thank you very much for having me today.
Awesome. Great to have you, Ryan. Megan, hoping I can get an introduction from you and what you've been working on over at Kayak.
Sure. Thanks, Kelsey. I'm Megan Fish. I'm the Legal Operations Coordinator of Kayak and OpenTable, where I've been with them for a little over a year now. And I oversee, manage, and handle legal invoicing, corporate maintenance, CLM, legal software implementation, and general administrative tasks of a 13-person legal team, which also includes compliance. Prior to Kayak and OpenTable, I was legal office manager of a secondary ticketing company, Ticket Network, based in Connecticut, where I performed similar duties, but on a much smaller scale, a 2 to 3 person legal team.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. Want to just give everyone on today's call a brief overview of really what we're going to learn and what we're going to take out of today's webinar. And first and foremost, it's really how and what metrics you can use to manage outside counsel. I think a lot of great learnings and opportunities from this last year in particular that Megan and Ryan have been working on. Also, how technology can help you determine what those key KPIs are going to be and how to track them clearly for your legal leadership. And also the third one on here, which I know is always on everyone's mind and every GC and every legal ops team's mind, is how we can reduce that outside counsel legal spend using our billing guide enforcement, negotiating some really great rates or even discounts, alternative fee arrangements, and also how we can start benchmarking that data against our peers as well. So I know we're going to have some really great conversations, and hopefully a lot of these takeaways will be valuable for all of you and your legal teams. Now, a couple pieces before we really dig in today. Just did want to give a quick overview and reminder of some of the key takeaways from this last year. And as you'll see on one of kind of the pamphlets that's available for you in the bottom of today's screen, but our State of the Corporate Legal Department survey really took away 4 key impacts from the pandemics on legal departments. And that's really this increased and evolved workload. Again, no surprise to anyone on today's call, but knowing that 8 times as many law departments experienced a surge in workload as experienced a dip. And that workload changed from business as usual to really that crisis management. We also had a shifting demand for external counsel support, so using those law firms that you work with on a regular basis. Even though some of that demand fell and we were able to kind of cap down on some of that demand, we still had this shift to using more senior partners within our law firms, and that at the end of the day, unfortunately or fortunately for law firms, meant that they still did increase their revenues in 2020. Third, we also had many traditional legal departments struggle as they adapted to the changes within our lives as the pandemic appeared. And so what we did notice, though, is that many modern legal departments were better adapted to those changing conditions and the investments that they made in technology. And lastly, safeguarding the organization became a much higher priority and mitigating those pandemic risks that came out of the last year. We also saw when it came to legal departments that 5 times as many law departments suffered budget cuts as saw budget increases. Again, not a big shocker here by any means, but what this meant was that that shift to more for less in legal spending really moved from a desire to an imperative on how we can continue to run our legal departments. So without further ado, let's kind of set the stage on really where legal departments are today and how we can start digging into today's conversation. So every legal department is on a journey to gaining efficiencies and showing that value of the legal department. Now, we have a sophistication spectrum here, which really highlights the vast majority of legal departments, and really they're still working on a truly predictive and optimized operation. So wherever you may fall on this spectrum, you are not alone. Everyone is on their different journey as they kind of go through this spectrum. So evaluating your progress to this sophistication spectrum really allows you to set those goals and work towards continuous improvement. Now, I wonder if we could turn it over to our panelists. And Ryan, curious if you can start by just sharing, really where has your department evolved over the last few years and where are you sitting today?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is definitely a journey, and it's been interesting to see how our department and our legal operations team has evolved just over even the past few years. I'd say this past year also really kind of pushed us and forced us into some more progressive areas, especially as it relates to cost savings and really focusing on driving savings and controlling our spend. I'd place this in the optimize category. I think we've moved from proactive here to optimize. I'll touch on some of these examples later in the presentation, but we're definitely in that optimized and now even moving kind of dipping into the predictive state a little bit. But I'd say definitely at optimize. I think this year a big focus for us has been the use of RFPs and bids and discounts, again, just as a measure to control costs and have a little bit more predictability into our spend, and also moving into more reporting on law department performance as well, which we'll touch on later. So I'd say Stryker's currently sitting in optimized.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Megan, can you share where the kayak team is sitting today?
Definitely. I'd say we're about in between proactive and optimized. We're starting to move into more use for RFPs. We just initiated that and began using them in 2020, pushing for more bids and discounted rates, aligning with other of our brands to get those rates, et cetera, and really using the brand use of Legal Tracker to have a better centralized management of rates for those joint outside counsels.
Great to hear. That's awesome. I think you both are doing some really great work. So keep it up. And again, always a journey. All right. So want to dip a little bit further into some of those metrics. So really, let's start digging into some of those core metrics for your legal teams. Now, in the State of the Corporate Legal Department report, most of the metrics identified by legal departments were related to legal spend. And you can see those top 5 metrics listed here on the right. And it's clear that spend metrics and reporting are really critical in showing that the legal department is committed to being a good steward of the company's money and also allowing the legal department to quickly identify spend trends, adjust as needed, and really see where that risk is within the organization. Now, Megan, I'm wondering if you could start us off with some of your impressions or really just confirmation of some of these core reports and maybe how you've used them in the past to really help your team understand where you're at today.
Yeah, definitely. I can 100% confirm that the reports listed here are amazing. They're a great starting point, and probably the most common and most used reports for myself and for our team. Like I said, they're really good starting points to begin larger conversations with counsel, such as spend cuts. Who are we spending a lot on? Where can we reallocate this? Or maybe even consolidate. We have multiple firms working on similar advice matters, et cetera. And the forecasted spend versus actual spend report is also an amazing report to show, where budgets have been consistently off, and again, can really open up those larger discussions or conversations that need to be had with outside counsel in order to ensure that they're providing more accurate budgets. And overall, personally, I think these reports can be really great to show the little one-offs, that can really add up. And while they seem small at first, they can really add up and can begin those conversations of, should we bring this in-house? Maybe you should go back to bid, begin the RFP process for maybe new counsel.
That's awesome. And I think if anything, it's really about how do those metrics and reports really start leading to bigger conversations. And so it's great to hear that the team is having those. Ryan, I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts on what's missing. So what are some of those reports beyond kind of these top 5 that are really key to how your legal department runs?
Yeah, I'd start by saying I completely agree. I think these metrics are a great starting point. We definitely, whenever we're looking at our spend and reporting, we start with these, and we look at these on a year-over-year basis and on a quarterly basis, and compared to the previous year or quarter. It just really helps us with our budgeting process and looking at our spend. We've moved into this year doing more RFPs and alternative fee arrangements. And these type of reports are a good starting place to start giving us a little bit more predictability and to kind of give us our own benchmarks to start doing that. Some additional reports that we include on our dashboards, we always look at our top matters, top spend by matters. We definitely, when we're comparing spend year over year, we want to call out and look at, any outliers. Is there anything that can explain any spikes or dips in spend, just so we can kind of have a level comparison of the year over year spend and how we're doing, and to see a lot of the initiatives and programs we're doing actually make an impact on our spend. So we definitely look at our matters and do some call outs in our reporting. Perhaps maybe there was an M&A transaction that caused an increase in spend, or litigation, or we filed a litigation that might cause some spend increase. So we definitely take a look at those in our reporting. And then we also include, our department dashboards also include a lot of internal spend. So we'll look at budgets and actuals of our internal spend, whether it's external services, compensation, travel, et cetera. So we, in addition to our outside spend that we're looking at through these reports, will include that internal spend as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. I'm wondering, let's start to dig in even further into those reports and really what was critical over this last year. So really, as we look at kind of the beginning of the pandemic, so March, April last year, I know both of you made some really impactful decisions with those metrics and with those reports that helped your legal departments really make sure that they were controlled tightly, and that you had some really great stories for your finance teams. So I'm wondering, Ryan, could you start us off by talking a little bit more about how those reports that you just mentioned really helped the team take action when 2020 kind of fell upon us and gave us a bit of a shocker back in March?
Yeah, sure. So again, just reiterating, I mean, those reports really were our starting point when 2020 COVID kind of started picking up. We collectively huddled internal and came up with our response and our plan of how are we going to do our part? How are we going to help control costs, drive savings in a time where I think everyone was really interested in that. So those reports were really kind of our starting point to really let's take a look at who are our key top partner firms in some of our main practice areas, particularly in intellectual property, litigation, and employment. And we use those reports just to begin having conversations with our firms on how we wanted to respond. We really truly see our firms as extensions of our department. So it's a very collaborative conversation. So we met with our key firms in each practice area and discussed additional discounts off of their rates and their billings during part of 2020, about a 10 to 20% discount with most of our firms. But we were able to, in doing that, we were also able to work very closely with our legal tracker CSM, and we actually built a discount report. So we asked our firms, when they're providing us these discounts, to include it as an invoice level adjustment, because we wanted to be able to report back to the business on what we were doing in legal to help drive savings. So together with our CSM, we were able to build a nice, easy discount report that we could run each month and capture the savings that we were obtaining from these additional discounts. We also built a litigation-specific report. In addition to asking our firms for some discounts on rates, we really focused on the work that they were performing and asked that they take a look at the work and, kind of keep it to that essential task only work. So our team was able to build a very comprehensive report of all of our litigation spend by firm, by hours, and really take a look at the trends. And we could clearly see the impact that those conversations our litigation team was having with their key law firms, that it was having on the spend, and we could see that in the reports. So that's kind of how the reports allowed us to take action during the pandemic.
Awesome. And also, Ryan, I do recall that you had some conversations around payment terms as well. Was that another initiative?
Yep, that was another initiative last year. Cash flow was very important conversation around March of last year. So we ran some reports of all of our firms and looked at the how fast we were paying invoices, and we realized we were paying things very, very quick. And also realized that there were some incorrect payment terms that were different. They were actually lower than they should be. So we also used those reports and included that in our conversations with our law firms that we were going to be pushing out payment terms. And eventually we did incorporate that into our 2021 billing guidelines.
Wonderful. Continuous improvement. That's great. Now, Megan, certainly, both Megan and Ryan are amazing Legal Tracker clients. So they utilize Legal Tracker for e-billing and matter management, which we greatly appreciate their insights into. Really helpful to have some of these awesome stories coming out of that usage. Now, Meg, I'm wondering if you could go a little bit further into how Tracker in particular really helps support your ability to show that real savings and those spending trends over this last year, and how leadership reacted to those trends that you were able to share with them.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, as Ryan said, the spend reports are absolutely critical. And you were able to review high spend matters, which of course impacted our decision-making to begin reassessment of current preferred outside counsel, which matters were increasing in general and why, which did lead to big changes, cutting off or terminating firms that had really high spend, being able to compare similar firms of the same, like substantive law, and see who has better rates, et cetera, and to move from one to the other. Also, Legal Tracker's audit functionality is probably my absolute best friend. With the audit functionality, I was able to easily review costs that were incurred that might fall out of our billing guidelines, reject any timekeeper rates for rates that were not pre-approved, which really helped to kind of rein in spend. And while, again, it might seem to be small at first, they can definitely add up over time, and as those hours pile up. And I guess this also leads to the conversation of expanding the functionality of Tracker to automated rejection, so that the spend is automatically happening, or the reining in of spend is automatically happening. We can kind of shut it down before it even hits the audit feature. So it's also not and more streamlined, definitely.
That's another great example. Again, just to go back to the sophistication model, where I think a lot of legal departments start with really having more of that interaction with their firms. But as the volume increases and the invoices come in, it's so much easier to have that automated, reject or reduce functionality, so you can kind of build your way into that more automated workflow, which is great to hear. Keep it coming. That's awesome. So want to, as I'm kindly talking about our law firms that we work with every day, want to dig a little bit more into really what the impact has been and what those conversations have been over this last year. Again, I know you've talked a little bit about what those conversations have looked like. But as I mentioned earlier, our law firms recorded record profit, in 2020. And so I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on really how legal departments can set those clear expectations with the law firms and really stay aligned internally. Again, Ryan, I know you talked about seeing your firms as an extension of your team, and I know that's how a lot of folks feel as well. But how do you really have kind of those clear guidance on what their practices and procedures should be, and really how they can and have responded when you do provide them with some of the trends that you're seeing or some of the behaviors in which you're looking for some changes on their part. And so Meg, maybe you could dive in a little bit further. Again, I know we talked a little bit about the automatic rate reduction or some of those expenses to auto reduce, but maybe you could dive in a little bit more on what you've been working on and how those communications have gone.
Personally, I find a really good way to set the clear expectations is to, from the get-go, just to really make your billing guidelines known and not budge on them, to set that clear expectation that we will be enforcing these, that these are the rules, and again, we won't be budging on them, and you can upload them into Tracker to be able to also easily reference them repeatedly over and over again to outside counsel if there's any errors in budgeting, accruals, timekeeper rates, non-billable items, whatever it is. They already know the guidelines in which we'll be working with them. And so when you do, reject a line item or a timekeeper rate change, it really shouldn't come as a surprise to them. They should know that it's going to happen. And again, that can pave the way for later auto rejections. Again, no surprise there. We're setting the standard from the get-go that this is what it is, and it's not going to be anything different by incorporating it into the engagement letter, et cetera. And again, with the trends that you first notice in Tracker regarding spend or poor budgeting, can be great to begin the conversation with outside counsel on those expectations, again, that were already set, to constantly bring them up and remind them that that's what it is, and to show that they're not meeting them. And then you can use the proof from Tracker to show them, how they're not meeting them. And of course, consistent disregard for these can lead to termination of an engagement letter. Again, noticing year-over-year high spend growing quite steadily. It didn't really come as a surprise to move to a new firm after we had consistently brought them, this is the spend. These are what you provided us for a budget for accrual. It's not really adding up. We're going to have to cut you loose. Spend trends, highly influential in consolidating matters. So if we're using 3 different firms for employment law advice, we can identify the total spend and consolidate them to get the best price. And again, I don't think that any of these actions should really come as a surprise by setting the communication from the get-go that you're going to be attentive to budgeting and accrual processes, and with the use of Tracker to be able to highlight whether they are or are not meeting those expectations.
Oh, that's super helpful. Thanks, Megan. And Ryan, I'm wondering if you could just extend on that in talking about how your firms have really worked, again, with you over this last year to account for the tighter budgets that you had to work through internally.
Yeah, so I mentioned, we really do see our firms as extensions of our department. They have years of experience with our company, and we see them as good, good partners. And when last year we really made it a point to collaborate internally first and really get aligned on our response plan. And so we had sort of a coordinated approach of how we wanted to discuss things with our firms. So after we did that, we had those communications with our firms around, as I mentioned, discounts, shifting demands of, to external or essential work, and payment terms. Additionally, what we did last year to kind of account for some of the tighter budgets was we engaged an outside legal vendor to use their platform for RFPs and competitive bidding. We happened to do that kind of at the right time when there was a heavy focus on driving cost savings, but also just having a little bit more predictability into the spend. So by now moving to more RFPs and bidding events and moving towards more AFAs from hourly rates, we're really able to drive cost savings by having some healthy competition amongst our firms. A huge benefit of doing this has also been really finding the right firm for the matter. We may go to our kind of key employment firms for a particular matter, but one of those firms just has the right experience with the venue or the judge or opposing counsel to really get the best result for Stryker. So that's been really, really helpful to account for some of the tighter budgets. And our finance partners love a little bit more predictability in what they're going to spend in there. And a lot of times, we've been moved because we're moving to more alternative arrangements. For example, we may have a matter that's capped by phase, and we have the predictability, and things might settle early, or they overestimated the amount, so we're not paying as much as we thought we would. So there's just lots of benefits, and our firms have been incredible to work with on this as well. They're also very interested in coming up with creative ways to help us out. We incorporated some of the requirements of this RFP platform into our billing guidelines as well. And again, just have that communication in the beginning with our firms on expectations of what the process would look like moving forward.
I love that. RFPs with firms. It's good to keep them competitive. That's great. Ryan, last piece, and I know we've all three of us have had conversations around diversity, and certainly continues to be a really big topic within the legal community. Wondering what you're working on, again, kind of as we think about 2021, 22 around diversity in particular for the legal team.
Yeah, cost savings and budgets and everything was not the only thing on our minds last year. We're really focused on diversity and inclusion. We incorporated some additional language in our billing guidelines around Stryker's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and our expectations that our outside law firms share that commitment. And we asked for additional details of data that they can provide us in Legal Tracker to track the diversity data, so we can start looking at staffing of our matters and how our firms are putting diverse teams on our matters, because we all know diverse teams lead to better results. But also going through the RFP process now through our RFP platform, we've also been able to drive our diversity initiatives by asking firms through the RFP process about the diverse team members they're going to put on our matters, and also just a lot of the efforts the firms are undertaking as a whole around diversity and inclusion. And that's really been an important factor in our sourcing decisions, is diversity. And it has impacted who we've selected on RFPs, depending on how they've shown their commitment to diversity. So that's definitely been something very important to us.
Wonderful. That's great. Love that work. So let's dive in a little bit more into that legal budgeting process that I know we've been talking a little bit already during today's call. But as we dive into the 2021 budgeting process, and really what metrics were used and what decisions were made based on some of those assessments, I'm wondering, Meg, if you could share some of the learnings that you had with your team on really this last cycle of the budgeting process, and what did or did not make and I think it's going to be make 2020 a unique year when it came to that time to budget for the future?
Yeah, 2020 was wild, to say the least. It really drove home the need for zero cost based budgeting as opposed to, best worst case scenario, or just looking back on past usage and really trying to be more predictive of who we really do intend to use, and having solid logic and reasoning to use certain outside counsel, which of course in turn led to more conversations about transferring work in-house, again, consolidating matters, etc. And just a stricter adherence to an actual budgeting process. Before, it seems it was mostly manual, again, very based on past usage. We spent X on this firm one year. We anticipate maybe the same next year. But again, trying to rein in it a bit more and work with our firms to provide us accurate budgets that we can kind of have conversations around. And through Tracker's budget functionality, this really made it a more seamless and easier process to, request them to upload them, and then, they pop up on our end, and we can then go through and review and modify as need, leave comments to them, and just talk through them a bit more than, us stating that it's going to be this, or them, again, stating that it's going to be this, and not really talking about it further than that, and accepting things just really at face value. And again, 2020 was so unique. And since business essentially halted for Kayak and Open Table, being in the travel and restaurants sphere, you really had to make sure we were looking at our budget with a fine-tooth comb, and that we were really starting to implement a better budgeting process to justify our spend.
Yeah, if anyone knows the impacts, it's certainly you and your team. So that's super helpful to hear about. And again, Ryan, I know same thing for the Stryker team. Really, 2020, as most people, was an outlier. But as you approach that 2021 budgeting, what were some of those key takeaways for you and your team? And what were some of the actions that you took during the budgeting process, and maybe even just sharing to what information helped make some of those decisions for you alongside your finance team?
Yeah, we definitely saw 2020 as an outlier. So when we started planning for 2021 towards the end of 2020, we really used 2019 spend as sort of our baseline for the budgeting process. So going back to a lot of the metrics and reports we discussed earlier, we really took a look at our total 2019 spend and looked at it by org unit, and just started to do a comparison of 2019, 2020, again, with 2020 being a bit of an outlier, and start to plan for 2021. Some nice takeaways through this process of collaborating with our finance partners in this planning process was, we came up with a really good go-forward plan of how we were going to approach the budgeting process, and also reconcile our legal checker data with how the spend data is reported by our finance partners in their systems and how they're reporting it. So just a lot of good efficiencies gained. So we're planning on quarterly finance and legal operations check-ins where we reconcile and look at how we're doing with our spend against budget, and also putting together reviews with our businesses on the budgeting process. But another piece of this that was really beneficial for us, and just kind of really scrutinizing our spend, was also looking at opportunities. So looking at areas where potentially we can shift work from an outside provider and move it in-house, and kind of look at what we spent outside, and what would that look like bringing it in-house. So just kind of helping drive, cost savings that way, and a little bit more predictable spend. So that was a nice thing we uncovered kind of during this entire process of planning for 2021.
Great. Really great learnings. And honestly, we've spent a lot of time today talking about, what we've learned over 2020 and some of those really valuable processes that your teams have in place. I'm thinking, let's really start to wrap today's call with focusing in on what's the future look like for your teams, really what's on that roadmap. How do we get back to that sophistication spectrum and really continue to go to that predictive model, if you will, the shining light at the end of the tunnel. So wondering, maybe Meg, you could start us off with just sharing some of your goals for 2021 and beyond, and really what you think, what your recommendation would be to help legal departments become more sophisticated or start down that path of that sophistication journey.
Sure. Yeah. So for 2021, I definitely want to continue the conversation of more, again, strict adherence to the billing guidelines, and kind of reinforcing that in our firm as well as our internal counsel's minds, that those need to be included in every engagement letter that we enter into, and that they're, again, adhered to by all our firms, which, will move into automatic rejections of non-billable time, fees, et cetera, rate sheets as well, and also D&I initiatives, which kind of tie into the rate sheets, looking to use Tracker to collect information on the demographics of our firms, the staffing of our matters. Similarly to Ryan, we're really committed to having a diverse internal counsel as well as external outside counsel, and that everyone shares the same ideas and initiatives as we do. And again, implementing that in our billing guidelines, the workflow processes, that information to us, and the percentage of demographics of staffing of matters, et cetera. I'm looking to really include a budget for all matters, regardless of whether it's litigation or just advice, just a budget really for everything we work on. And probably one of my biggest initiatives is implementing a legal workflow software to understand internal staffing needs or lack thereof, and to have a more streamlined workflow process for internal requests and work that the team is working on, to see if there's any needs internally, or anywhere that we can implement any automation, which I think is really important to a more sophisticated legal department, is more automation, more software workflow processes to be able to review data, manage workflow, invoicing, basically all really tasks that you have to make it seamless, right? So that I could leave Kayak tomorrow and someone could pick up where I left off, no problem, and just make a well-oiled machine.
Those are a lot of the same initiatives that I'm hearing on my end. So that's great to hear. You're on the right track. Ryan, wondering if you could share from the Stryker perspective, what are you guys working on, and kind of thoughts for folks on today's call?
Yeah. So internally, one of our strategic priorities in our legal and compliance department is innovation. And that's definitely something our legal ops team is looking at this year. How can we challenge the status quo? So we also are looking at a lot of automation, automated workflows, process automation, just not only for our in-house legal ops team, but also for our attorneys, and just create some efficiencies and free up some time. So our attorneys who this past year have had a very heavy workload, don't have to potentially go to outside counsel for as many things, and drive some savings there. So definitely looking at innovation, automation, We'd like to continue focusing on cost savings through our RFP and competitive bidding program. Also doing a little bit more intelligence into our current spend and looking at matter staffing and having better benchmarking. And then lastly, also really getting into kind of the more predictive state and focusing on performance, law firm metrics, evaluations, and scorecards. And we're really excited about some of the new and upcoming features relating to legal tracker scorecarding and evaluations, and can't wait for some of that, and really can't wait to leverage that to kind of help us move from that optimized to predictive state. So that's kind of our part of our journey for 2021. There's much more to that, but those are a couple of the key areas we're going to focus on.
That is really great insight. Thank you both. I definitely think, again, folks are probably not alone as they're hearing those initiatives shared by both of you. So thank you so much. I think just to wrap up today's conversation, really what's apparent to me, and as we've been talking, not only today, but over the last few weeks is, this clear investment in technology and processes and resourcing has really been that key factor for the successes in both of your legal departments, not only over this last year, but as you have been on these journeys for many years as well. And I think that's really, what it comes down to in making sure that you are an optimized legal department and that you are continuing to get better and continue down that journey. So really, again, Megan, Ryan, I want to thank you and sincerely appreciate taking the time today to share your experiences and recommendations on really how you were able to use data and metrics to navigate these significant changes within your legal departments and really just over the last year, and again, even pre-pandemic as well. So it's really clear that by having that insight and information, that managing legal spend and your outside counsel relationships can really help identify more efficiencies for your legal department and honestly, for your organizations as a whole, really to make sure that legal is that enabler, that business enabler for the broader organization. So again, I want to sincerely thank both of you for your time. For anybody that's on today's call, I think it goes without saying, feel free to let myself know if you have further questions, and happy to navigate questions to Megan and Ryan if there's something unique or specific that you'd like to pick their brains on as well. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and wrap us up for today. But thank you for joining, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you.